They've been hired, fired, and rehired from the same iconic animated franchise, and their first TV show was canceled after one season, but it grew into being a cult classic. Yet Phil Lord and Christopher Miller defied the early criticisms and odds of their careers, and their projects have now become some of the most iconic films of the 21st century. Their careers have always had a bunch of ups and downs, crazy stories, and produced some masterworks of this era of film, but what really is the story of Phil Lord and Christopher Miller? Let's dive into their journey with some professionally unprofessional film. Now obviously Lord and Miller is a directing duo, so how did we get that "and" in Lord and Miller? So what happened was Lord and Miller were both students at Dartmouth College, and while they were there they became friends and they started collaborating with each other, but their attention really grew outside of Dartmouth, where an article was written in a Dartmouth magazine about Christopher Miller, but that article wasn't just viral within Dartmouth. That article caught the attention of Disney CEO Michael Eisner. Of all people, Michael Eisner sees this article on Christopher Miller, and he kept getting the magazines because he had a relative who was an alumni at Dartmouth, and he kept getting all of the articles still because he was curious and had like an attachment to Dartmouth. So he kept reading all of this stuff, and he saw the Christopher Miller article, and he was so impressed by it that he brought Lord and Miller in to Disney, and he decided to give them a deal where they would basically work for Disney Television for a little bit. Now unfortunately this deal with Disney didn't really go anywhere. They didn't really make anything of note, and they just weren't really getting too much work. However, the upside to this was it did get them on the map, that Michael Eisner noticed them, he thought they were good enough to be hired by Disney, so this was enough to get Lord and Miller's attention for other people, so they decided to just keep pitching ideas to studios because nothing can hurt with that, right? Just pitching ideas, but unfortunately nothing was really getting greenlit until they had one idea about a high school where they had a bunch of clones within it. You may have heard of it. It is called Clone High. Now, Clone High isn't a random idea that they came up with after this Disney deal. Lord and Miller were actually drafting the Clone High idea while they were in college. So this idea, they had basically had it cemented and what they wanted Clone High to be when they were pitching it. And they were supposed to have it carried by Fox, but unfortunately they decided not to continue with Clone High. However, MTV decided to buy the series themselves, and it was aired on MTV. Now, Clone High only ran for one season with 13 episodes, but it was met with a bunch of acclaim. Like, Lord and Miller's first project being Clone High was an insane thing to have on their resume. The only issue is that MTV didn't really want to continue the series, so after its first season, despite the acclaim, Clone High was dropped. But that didn't ruin Lord and Miller's confidence, and they wanted to stay in animation, so they came up with another idea to take animation to the big screen. Now, the idea that they decided to bring to the big screen for animation ended up becoming one of Sony's animation's most iconic films, still to this day, with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. Now, back in 2003, Lord and Miller started working on the script for Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, but the problem was they were fired from the franchise after their script just wasn't really being agreed upon with the studio, and they were fired, and then somebody else decided to pick up the script and keep going with it, but then they were fired from it. So that was two sets of writers that were fired from Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs of all movies. But then they decided in 2006, you know what? We're just gonna bring Lord and Miller back. What's the worst that can happen? But this firing for Lord and Miller, yeah, it definitely hurt because this was basically their big screen debut here, and they really liked this idea, but they decided that, hey, if the studio doesn't like it, we're gonna use that to our benefit and get help with the crew. So Lord and Miller, they were talking with the crew to get story ideas, they worked with the studio to get this accepted for the public and everything, and all of that was enough to get the film made, and thank God this film was made. I love Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, a bunch of people do, but despite being fired the first time, they were rehired obviously, and they were even basically just chosen to direct the film. They wrote the script, they worked with everybody, so it showed that they were able to adapt and work with people, and the studio just said, hey, you guys can direct the film, and it's definitely a good thing that they did, because I really can't imagine a Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs movie that wasn't directed by Lord and Miller. So yeah, they were hired, fired, and then rehired to their own idea. So an insane trajectory, a last bit of hope, and man, that basically changed their careers, basically being rehired for Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. It looked like it was over, and then they were back. One season of their show, then dropped, and then fired for Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. It looked like they were done, but Lord and Miller came back, and this movie was such a big success that Sony was like, we're making a sequel to this thing. And yeah, sequel isn't even bad at all. It's a decent film. Now, Lord and Miller's first projects were now in animation, and they decided, you know what? live action might be fun. Let's try a different medium. So they basically just went ahead and did that. But this time they didn't write the script, because the script that they decided to turn into live action was written by Jonah Hill in 2008, and this script would become 21 Jump Street. Now back in 2008, when Jonah Hill was writing the script, he wanted to turn the drama series 21 Jump Street, which was led by Johnny Depp, he wanted to make it, instead of more seriously toned, he wanted to turn it into a comedy, and his idea to direct it wasn't Lord and Miller, he wanted Rob Zombie to direct it after he did the Halloween remake and everything. He wanted Rob Zombie to basically just direct 21 Jump Street, but he didn't do it. And Lord and Miller, they kept pitching themselves to the studio that they wanted to direct the 21 Jump Street movie, and with Rob Zombie not wanting to do it, Lord and Miller landed the job. And once they were hired, it was smooth sailing. 21 Jump Street became a big success. They had a bunch of fun making it. Jonah Hill and Channing Tatum obviously had a bunch of chemistry, and the success of this film, Lord and Miller loved working in live action so much with 21 Jump Street, they came back to make 22 Jump Street, which is another success, and people even debate if it's even better than the first film. I'm still a big fan of the first film, even though 22 is so good. Now, after 21 Jump Street, Lord and Miller's confidence was just through the roof. They were validated with Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs. 21 Jump Street, different medium, and they had so much fun going for it that they just loved doing live action so much. Their confidence was high, and so much so that they decided to pitch an idea to Warner Brothers for a movie about brick toys called The Lego Movie. Now, The Lego Movie was basically trying to be made by a bunch of other people. It had been an idea long before Lord and Miller had even really started 21 Jump Street. Different people were pitching ideas, but nothing was really sticking out to the studio. But Lord and Miller's idea was that good that Warner Brothers went, hey, you guys can do it, you guys want out, and you're gonna direct the Lego Movie. And once again, thank God they're the ones to direct it, because the Lego Movie, I mean, we all know the story. It's one of the most creative looking movies of the 2010s for animation, and it still, like, ages really well. The Lego Movie is just great all around. And this early success, like, they had Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, both 21 Jump Streets. They made the Lego Movie that everyone was basically taking notice that, hey, these guys are very versatile filmmakers. They can do any medium they want. They have a very distinct style that everyone seems to love, whether it's animation or live action. These guys, their quality is high, their style is great, and the general public loves them as well as cinephiles. Everyone wanted to work with Lord and Miller. So much so that after the Lego Movie's success, Warner Brothers went, Lego Movie was a huge success and the stuff that you guys have been producing is incredible, so we want you to make the Flash movie. And Lord and Miller were like, absolutely, we want to make the Flash movie. Like, who was going to reject making the Flash movie? So they started working on a treatment for it, and then they got another call, and this call was from Disney. And Disney was calling them to be like, hey, we're working on a Han Solo movie, and we want to know if you guys would want to direct the movie. And Lord and Miller went, okay, I understand who would want to drop the Flash movie. So Lord and Miller, they did drop the Flash movie because they wanted to work on Solo, a Star Wars story, and man, look at where their trajectories were going. Where 10 years ago, they got their show dropped after one season. Now they were at the point where they could literally drop the Flash movie so they could go make a Star Wars movie. But this is also the point where all stories, they have to have the bad guys close in section, and things started to fall downhill. So despite dropping the Flash, Lord and Miller were happy because they were working on a Star Wars movie. However, this was a very short-lived tenure as the head of Solo, a Star Wars story. Creative differences were coming in because Lord and Miller, they do have a unique comedic style, and when something is unique like that, they're gonna have a lot of people going for it, but sometimes there's gonna be a small group of people that just do not like it. Kathleen Kennedy was one of those people where Kathleen Kennedy and then the writer of Solo, Lawrence Kasdan, they wanted a different kind of thing for Solo, so even though they knew Lord and Miller had that style, they saw it and then went, yeah, I don't know if this is working for Solo. So unfortunately, all of these creative differences, Lord and Miller were dropped from Solo. They were fired, like just straight up. They were fired for a second time, Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, and then Solo. They've been fired twice now in their careers. And Solo, being dropped from a Star Wars movie, obviously hurts. Lord and Miller, however, they were also kind of thinking, we abandoned the Flash movie only to get fired from Solo, a Star Wars story. That is a very unfortunate turn of events to happen. However, an unfortunate turn of events all have an uprising, and honestly, this down period for Lord and Miller, if you even want to call it a down period, they bounced back so quick, because the same year that Solo, a Star Wars story came out, there is an animated film that basically just blew the minds of everybody and is known as one of the best animated films ever, called Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Now, we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. We got to the down point of Lord and Miller's careers pretty fast, and Solo, a Star Wars story, like, that was 2017 when they were fired. We need to go back to get to Spider-Verse's story. So back in 2014, Sony was hacked, and a bunch of documents and information was leaked. And one of the things that was leaked in those documents was there were plans to make an animated Spider-Man movie. And what they wanted to do with this animated Spider-Man movie was go into the multiverse and tackle the Spider-Verse storyline. But another piece that was attached to this information was they wanted Lord and Miller to do it. They had Lord and Miller attached to produce it and work on it and everything. So in 2014, while they had the Flash stuff going on and the Solo stuff, they were working on Spider-Verse. Now, at the time, and now in 2017 and 2018, when Spider-Verse came out, it looks like Lord and Miller made the wrong decision abandoning Flash and getting fired from Solo from abandoning the Flash. It didn't look great on paper. However, Lord and Miller decided to look at this in a positive light, and they decided to look at it in the sense of, this didn't work out for Solo, but we learned from that experience, and having that time freed up where we're not working on a Star Wars movie that came out in like May of that year, so a couple months difference between that and Spider-Verse, but having that extra time to work on Spider-Verse made the movie better. So Lord and Miller decided to look at it as, hey, Spider-Verse turned out to be like an absolute masterpiece according to a bunch of people and considered one of the best superhero movies and animated movies that a bunch of people have seen. Would we have made it that good if we didn't get fired from Solo to have that time and have that learning experience from the failure? So even though a bad thing happened, Lord and Miller decided to use it and go, this is a good thing at the end of the day. Now, after producing Spider-Verse, the hype that Lord and Miller had, the amount that they had after that 21 Jump Street, 22, and like Lego movie, the amount of hype they had in that span of time, double that, triple that, whatever you want to do after Spider-Verse, because when you make a movie at that caliber and you haven't really had a major miss yet, Lord and Miller, everyone wanted to work with them. Every studio wanted them employed in their studio making something because everything they've done has just had a great reaction from the general public. And they were wanting to get back in the directing chairs, and studios were like, we would totally love to have that, because after Spider-Verse and a couple years went by, they hadn't really directed anything. They produced stuff, they wrote stories for stuff, but the last movie they directed was Lego Movie, like 2014. So it had been a couple years since they were sitting in the chair. And they were given an opportunity to adapt an Andy Weir sci-fi novel into a film, and one of Andy Weir's books was previously adapted with The Martian, where Ridley Scott directed the film. And Lord and Miller, in 2020, were given the chance to direct a new adaptation with Ryan Gosling producing it, and this movie would become Project Hail Mary. Now, due to some of the commitments with Spider-Verse, they weren't going to be able to write the script, so Drew Goddard wrote the script, who also did The Martian, so pretty safe bet to just have the guy who wrote a previous adaptation to just continue doing it, because hey, if it worked once, why would you get someone else if Goddard is right there? So when Lord and Miller were working on Across the Spider-Verse, Goddard was writing the script. And production didn't start until 2024 on Project Hail Mary, so in that span from 2020 to 2024, when Lord and Miller were just waiting for production to basically start, they produced a bunch of other films, from Mitchell's vs. the Machines, Across the Spider-Verse, and even Cocaine Bear. But then once production started in 2024, everything was going on for them with Project Hail Mary. And from here, we've basically seen all the stories in the recent months with everything with this movie. No green screens, no CGI, everything was just practical. They built Rocky, the little alien, and everything. And Project Hail Mary, everyone was just loving how the production was for this and the hype behind it. And then the movie comes out, and I didn't review it on the channel. I reviewed some other stuff though and did an Oscars live stream. You should totally check some of that stuff out. But the reviews for Project Hail Mary were so high that on Rotten Tomatoes, it was the highest rated film of Ryan Gosling's career. And when you think that Ryan Gosling was in La La Land, Blade Runner 2049, Drive, a bunch of other really critically acclaimed films, this was the highest of his career. And to have that happen with Ryan Gosling as your lead, insane move for them, but everyone just swamped to the theaters to see Project Hail Mary. And while in an adaptation, it's still an original sci-fi story put to theaters. Ryan Gosling was enough to draw people in, and the word of mouth for how good the movie was, and this movie was an absolute success. So what's next after Project Hail Mary? Well, Lord and Miller do have a movie set up right now that they're going to be working on, and this movie, they were attached to do it 10 years ago. Back in 2017, Lord and Miller were hired to do an adaptation of the book Artemis, which is written by Andy Weir. Yes, another space movie adapted from an Andy Weir book Lord and Miller will be doing. So if you love Project Hail Mary, all I'm saying is you might want to get your hype up for Artemis, because it's the same author, same directors as Lord and Miller. So my hype for Artemis is through the roof, and they have that movie in production. So that wraps up the story for Lord and Miller, basically from getting their TV show dropped after one season to making Project Hail Mary in the span of a 20-year career span. Lord and Miller have had an insane career with some crazy stories, some firings, to making some of the most successful films of the past 15, 20 years. So Lord and Miller have had an absolutely incredible career, and it isn't even over yet. Like, they still have Artemis and a bunch of other films left to make in their careers. I am excited for whatever they can do next, but what a story to look at for where they started to get to where they are now with Project Hail Mary. So thank you all for watching this retrospect and video so much. Make sure to like, comment your favorite Lord and Miller project down below, and subscribe to the channel. I would greatly appreciate getting closer to that 100 subscriber goal. So once again, thank you all, and I will see you all next time.